Hello, my name is David and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm kicking off our read of the very first text from Medieval Monthly here for June, and that's going to be Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. My particular translation I have here is a verse translation by Marie Boroff. So, for those that don't know, Sir Gawain and the Green Knight was written by a poet of unknown identity back in somewhere between 1350 and 1400, so around the time of Geoffrey Chaucer. He was believed to have written four different poems: Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, Pearl, Patience, and Cleanness, which were all contained on the same manuscript that has been discovered. And that's a lot of what we know about him. He lived in the northern part of England, whereas Chaucer lived in the southern part of England. And you can tell the difference between the two when you compare and contrast the dialect that the two used in their written Middle English, which was the form of English that was being used at the time that both of these authors were writing. And so a lot of folks tend to think that Shakespeare writes Old English, which is absolutely far from the truth. Old English is back in Beowulf, King Alfred, that time of writing, 800, 900, 1000. Much older version of English. Still has some words in there that you'll be able to identify, but has letters that we don't use today. It has a whole set of structure and vocabulary that definitely needs some help being able to pick up and understand. Whereas Chaucer, you can go pick up a copy of the Canterbury Tales, which is written in Middle English, and with some effort, you could sit through and read the text and get a good idea of what he was trying to say. Maybe have to look up some words along the way, but you should be able to fumble through the overall gist of what is being said. Now, the dialect in the northern part of England was a little more obscure, a little harder to get through, so it's a little more challenging to read in the original Middle English. And so that is why most folks today will be reading through a modern translation by somebody. And I want to take a moment to just kind of give a brief overview of translation in general. When you're looking at translations, there's a couple of ways that authors can approach, or translators can approach how to interpret a text and convey it to the reader. They can try to capture word to word, so they are going through and trying to get the exact same meaning conveyed along for each and every word as is written in the original text. This is a relatively uncommon form of translation. Most translators steer clear of that in favor of the second form, which is to provide maybe not a word to word exact translation, but to give a translation that captures the essence of what was being said in that line, that sentence, that word, um, and get it into a way that is more readable, more accurate to more modern ways of communicating things. And so it typically is a sacrifice in the way of readability. And then the third way of translating is uh, also not as common, but it is more of along the lines of keeping the overall gist of the text intact, but taking very liberal approaches to what they put in, what they put out, in order to get it as close to a modern reading text as possible. And you can see these kinds of different translation methodologies in action when you look at different translations of the Bible, for instance, where you have ones that are word to word, ones that are more of verse to verse. They're capturing the essence of it, and ones that are striving 100% to make it readable and accessible to a modern crowd of their choosing. And so, when looking at poetry, especially going back to the medieval period, you also have the problem of rhyme scheme, you have the problem of alliteration, things like that. So meter, rhyme, um, all of those little nuances in poetry, it's really challenging, as you would expect, to translate something into a new form and retain whatever the poetic style had within that poetry. Now, Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, like many medieval poems, was very alliterative in format, meaning that it had repetition of certain sounds, vowel or consonant sounds within the same line, and you'll be able to hear a little bit of that in action in this translation. So I'm going to just read a little bit for you to kick this off. The poem itself is 2,530 lines, roughly. My particular copy starts on page 15 and ends on page 74 before going into notes and things like that. So it's a relatively quick read in terms of how long it's going to take to get through. So hopefully you're able to join us sometime this month. We'll be having discussion all month long in a Discord hosted by Victoria at a musical bookworm. I'll put a link to that Discord channel down below so you can join. And then as a quick reminder, in July we'll be reading Eagle's Saga, EGIL''S Saga. So it'll be an Icelandic Viking Norse saga. And then we'll be reading the Song of Roland in August. So I hope that you can join me for both of those. I've got a Discord of my own that I've set up after Victoria had already offered to host for June. So in July, we'll be kicking off the discussions for those two texts, and I'll have a link for that down below as well. So I'm going to read just a couple lines here. So Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, Part 1. Since the siege and the assault was ceased at Troy, the walls breached and burnt down to brands and ashes. The knight that had knotted the nets of deceit was impeached for his perfidy proven most true. It was high-born Aeneas and his haughty race that since prevailed over provinces and proudly reigned. Over well nigh all the wealth of the West Isles, great Romulus to Rome repairs in haste. With boast and with bravery builds he that city, and names it with his own name, that it now bears. Ticius to Tuscany, and towers raises. Langobard in Lombardy lays out homes, and far over the French sea Felix Brutus on many broad hills in high Britain he sets most fair, where war and wrack and wonder by ships have sojourned there, and bliss by turns with blunder, in that Lancelot had to share. And since this Britain was built by this baron great, bold boys bred there in broils delighting, that did in their day many a deed most dire. More marvels that have happened in this merry land than any other I know, since that olden time. But of those that here built of British kings, King Arthur was counted most courteous of all. Wherefore an adventure I aim to unfold, that a marvel of might men might think it, and one unmatched among Arthur's wonders. If you will listen to my lay but a little while, as I heard it in a hall, I shall hasten to tell anew, as it was fashioned featly in tale of daring do, and linked in measures meetly by letters tried and true. So you can see there, just in those first 37 lines, roughly from the poem, a lot of the repetition of sounds within the line. And so it makes it a wonderful thing to, when you hear it being read, when you read it out loud, you really capture that sense of the alliteration within there, and it's joy to just enjoy. So I hope that you will enjoy this poem, that I'm looking forward to all of the discussion, and I hope that you can join us.